Chapter 12, Islamic Rule and the Crusades. The city shimmered under the desert sun, its limestone walls glowing like ivory against the wide blue sky. It was the year 638 CE. Jerusalem, the city of unyielding stones and unending prayers, waited in uneasy silence. Roman banners had fallen. Byzantine priests whispered anxious litanies, and the streets trembled with anticipation of a new power advancing from the south. Dust rose over the horizon where Arab horsemen, lean and sunburned, approached with the swiftness of the desert wind. At their head rode a man whose name would echo across centuries, Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab. Imagine the tension in the air as Jerusalem's patriarch Sophronius, spiritual heir, 2 centuries of Christian dominion, prepared to hand over the keys of the holy city. Behind him stood the solemn guardians of shrines built on faith and blood. Before him came men who prayed 5 times a day facing Mecca, proclaiming the oneness of God. This was no ordinary surrender. It was a moment when one civilization bowed out and another stepped in not with sword and fire, but with a treaty that would redefine the destiny of the world's most contested city. From that day onward, Jerusalem would pass through hands like a relic too sacred to belong to one people alone. First under the banners of Islam, then claimed by Latin Crusaders from Europe, and later retaken by the Kurdish general Saladin, the city became a theater where civilizations clashed again and again. To understand this struggle is to understand not only medieval history, but also the roots of modern passions that burn as fiercely today as they did 9 centuries ago. The Muslim conquest of Jerusalem, 638 CE. The story begins in the wake of the Prophet Muhammad's death in 632 CE Arabia. Once fractured by tribal feuds, had been unified under Islam's message. By 636, Muslim armies had already shattered Byzantine power in Syria at the Battle of Yarmouk, a victory so decisive that chroniclers describe the river running red with blood. The Byzantine emperor Heraclius, broken-hearted, is said to have looked back one last time at Antioch and whispered, "Farewell, a long farewell to Syria." But Jerusalem remained. The city fortified, revered, eternal was too important to ignore. Muslim commander Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah besieged it, but Sophronius refused to surrender to anyone except the Caliph himself. So, Umar, the austere second successor to Muhammad, traveled north from Medina. Accounts describe him arriving not on a grand stallion, but on a humble camel. He wore patched garments, an embodiment of the stark simplicity of early Islam. When he entered Jerusalem, there was no massacre, no looting. Instead, a treaty, the Pact of Umar, was signed. Christians were guaranteed protection for their lives, churches, and property, provided they paid the jizya tax. Jews, expelled by the Byzantines, were allowed to return for the first time in centuries. This was transformative. Jerusalem was no longer a peripheral outpost. For Muslims, it was now Al-Quds, the holy, the place where the Prophet Muhammad was believed to have ascended to heaven in the night journey. Upon the ruins of the old Jewish temple, Muslims began to construct the Dome of the Rock. Its golden crown would become one of the world's most recognizable sanctuaries. For nearly 5 centuries, Jerusalem thrived under Islamic stewardship. Pilgrims of all faiths wound their way through its narrow lanes. Markets bustled with silk, spices, and the chatter of Arabic, Greek, and Hebrew tongues. Yet beyond Jerusalem's walls, the Mediterranean world stirred with new ambitions. The Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem. By the late 11th century, Western Europe was poor, fractured, and deeply pious. Tales filtered back from the east of Muslim rulers barring Christian pilgrims from Jerusalem, of desecrated shrines, of cruel indignities. Many of these tales were exaggerated or outright fabricated, but they struck the medieval imagination like thunder. In 1095, Pope Urban II stood before the Council of Clermont in France and preached a sermon that would ignite the fury of Europe. Deus vult, God wills it. The crowd cried as knights, peasants, and lords alike took the cross, swearing to march eastward and liberate the Holy Sepulchre. What followed was both a pilgrimage and an invasion. The First Crusade. The march was brutal. Tens of thousands trudged across hostile terrain, leaving behind trails of starvation, disease, and slaughter. By 1099, ragged and half dead, the Crusaders reached Jerusalem. What happened next remains one of history's darkest episodes. Chroniclers describe rivers of blood filling the streets as Crusaders massacred Muslims and Jews indiscriminately. The once pluralistic city, nurtured for centuries under Islamic rule, was transformed into a fortress of exclusion. The Crusaders crowned their conquest by establishing the Kingdom of Jerusalem, a fragile, Latin Christian enclave surrounded by hostile neighbors. Gothic churches rose beside ancient mosques. European lords carved out fiefs and castles, importing feudalism into the Levant. For nearly a century, Jerusalem was a Christian city. Pilgrims from France, England, and Italy flocked to it, marveling at shrines they had dreamed of since childhood. But for Muslims, the loss of Al-Quds was a wound to the soul of the Ummah. A humiliation not just territorial, but spiritual. And in time, a leader would rise to heal it. Saladin, and the Ayyubid control his name was Salah ad-Din Yusuf, Ibn Ayyubinon, in the West simply as Saladin. Born in Tikrit in 1137, he was no mere warrior. Saladin was a statesman, a scholar, and a devout Muslim. In his early years serving under Nur-ad-Din, the ruler of Damascus, he learned that jihad was not only of the sword but also of the spirit. By the 1170s, Saladin had united Egypt and Syria. He built an army of remarkable discipline and positioned himself as the champion of Islam against the Crusader invaders. What set him apart was not only military genius, but his sense of honor. Even his enemies admired him. He showed mercy to captives, refrained from wanton cruelty, and lived by the code of chivalry. The defining moment came in 1187 at the Battle of Hattin. On a blistering July day near the Sea of Galilee, Saladin's forces encircled the Crusader army, parched and exhausted. By the end, the Crusader Kingdom was broken. The relic of the true cross was seized. Thousands of knights were taken prisoner, and the road to Jerusalem lay open. When Saladin's banners flew over the holy city, the world held its breath. Would there be another massacre? Another 1099? Instead, Saladin shocked the Christian world by showing restraint. There was no bloodbath. Ransoms were collected, captives released, churches preserved. For Jews, the gates of Jerusalem opened once more. After nearly a century, they returned under Muslim protection. Under the Ayyubids, Jerusalem flourished. Mosques thrived. Scholars and poets gathered. Pilgrims resumed their sacred journeys. Yet the Crusades were far from over. Europe reeled at the loss of Jerusalem. Kings such as Richard the Lionheart launched the Third Crusade in desperate attempts to reclaim it. Richard and Saladin clashed in legendary contests of strategy and will. But Jerusalem remained in Muslim hands. The saga of Jerusalem under Islamic and Crusader rule is more than conquests and counter-conquests. It is a mirror reflecting the deepest anxieties and aspirations of civilizations. For Muslims, the conquest of 638 symbolized the justice and tolerance of a new faith. Contrasting with Byzantine exclusion, the Crusader occupation represented arrogance outsiders imposing rule by slaughter. Saladin's recovery of Jerusalem became a touchstone for Islamic pride, proof that even in humiliation, unity and faith could restore dignity. For Christians, the Crusades were a paradox. On one hand, they embodied piety, courage, and sacrifice. On the other, they exposed the brutality and greed lurking beneath the cross. For Jews, these centuries were a pendulum swing between expulsion and refuge, their fate tethered to the struggles of others. The modern resonance is unmistakable. Jerusalem remains contested, claimed holy by Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. It's a memory of Saladin's mercy, the Crusaders' cruelty, and Umar's humility echo even today in political speeches, in popular culture, in the hearts of millions. History here is not past. It is present. As the sun sets over Jerusalem, its golden dome blazing against the twilight, one cannot help but wonder, is this city cursed to forever be the prize of conquerors, or is it sanctified precisely because it endures them all? From Umar's humble camel to Saladin's sword, from Crusader banners to modern conflicts, Jerusalem stands as both promise and warning where heaven and earth meet, and where the ambitions of men are tested against the eternity of stone.